Senate Minority Leader, Virginia Senate, Democrat, Fairfax, Dick Saslaw. Senator, great to have you back. Great to have you with us.
Well, thank you, John. It's good to be back. How have you been?
Well, I've been fabulous, but I tell you what. I told this to Senator Peterson yesterday. I said, well, you better get your book bags out because the Republicans just got schooled. This is why we call you the Godfather. You ran rings around your Republican Senate caucus colleagues yesterday in the special session. Tell us what went down.
Well, first off, the governor tried to, get something going with redistricting. The Republicans were not interested in that, and they claimed they were going to submit a map by September the 1st, but why you would have waited till then, because we started working on one back in, I guess, early July or mid-July, and they wouldn't agree to meet. Mm-hmm. Then, parallel to that, you had the thing with the judge, with Jane Roush. And let me tell you, I'm not an attorney, so when we have, a Fairfax judgeship, I talk to Dave Albo and I talk to Chap, and, whatever they agree on, that's what I go along with because that's their profession and they know the players. In this case, I called, a third party, a very prominent attorney and judge in the Mid-Atlantic region. Nothing but great words to say about, Jane Roush. So, the governor, meantime, had one of his aides called numerous times. I was told to Senator Norman, and I like Tommy, but he's not real good at returning phone calls sometimes.
Right.
And he didn't get back. Albo was the one that recommended. The guy who was appointed by the Speaker to be chair of the Courts of Justice was the one that wrote the letter and recommended Jane Roush to the governor. So we had to assume that, he was fully cognizant of what was going on. Let me correct one thing about how governors traditionally consult with the General Assembly on these types of appointments. I can tell you for a fact that George Allen never consulted me, and I'm pretty darn sure, given the relationship at the time, he didn't consult Cranwell when he appointed Symphony Kinzer. Mm-hmm. And Tim Kaine never, I want to repeat, never consulted me or anyone else when he made judge appointments. I don't know where they get this, that he didn't call us. And let's say that he didn't call, okay? That's a reason to reject the judge of this woman's qualifications? Are you kidding me? So, immediately I just began, I talked with John Watkins, who was pretty dismayed at, what they were about to do.
Right.
And I talked with him. I said, this is going to touch off a war that has no end. And let me tell you what I believe is driving this thing, John, more than anything else, is there in the leadership, Senator Norman, Bill Howe, Kirk Cox, the intense dislike of the governor. There's a lot of jealousy in there. This guy is highly successful. He's brought in more investment to this state in his first 18 months than the two previous governors did in their first 2.5 years. And these guys resent this, and they resent the publicity that he gets. And they decided they were going to go after him, and they picked a petty reason like he didn't call us. Well, excuse me, I didn't get called by anybody.
Well, it seems a little odd, Senator, and I want to inform my readers.
Sure.
Judge Roush certainly seemed to be qualified, no question about that. And I have a lot of respect for your colleague, Chap Peterson. But I want to inform my audience also. Dave Albo is a Republican legislator, House of Delegates member from Fairfax County. And Dave is a pretty serious guy. I mean, he's not one of these guys that throws bombs or anything. I mean, he's a pretty serious House of Delegates member. Dave Albo, Republican, sits on the committee, wrote a letter on Judge Roush's behalf. So she came to the governor.
He chairs the committee.
Yeah, he's a judiciary chair. Writes a letter on behalf of Judge Roush, sends it to McAuliffe along with Chap Peterson. You would think. I mean, if I'm the governor, and I'm not, I'm criticize McAuliffe where I think he goes off the rails. But if I'm the governor, I'm sitting there, and I get a letter from the chairman of the House Judiciary Committee, Dave Albo. I mean, one has to assume that he picked up the phone and talked to Speaker Howe, right? I mean, wouldn't that be a conclusion that anybody would make?
And I think he did. And Jane Roush called the speaker.
And what did the speaker say?
He voiced no objection to her, as far as I know. I haven't talked to Bill about this, but as far as I know, and from what I could read in the papers, he voiced no objection to her over the phone.
Well, and the other thing is, normally, we haven't talked to Judge Roush. She's in a difficult position. But normally, when a judge takes an interim appointment like this and they give up their judgeship they have to take it, normally they would talk to the powers to be sure that this is something that is going to go through, because obviously you don't want to give up the judgeship you have, take another judgeship, go down, and now you're out of a job. And so one would assume that she did her due diligence. She's a pretty intelligent woman. And again, this isn't any slight at all to Judge Alston. I think he would have been a fabulous choice as well. But it seems to me that when you get Dave Albo involved, there was credibility to Judge Roush that I was kind of shocked when the Republicans decided to attempt to oust her.
Well, by the way, she called Senator Norman twice. Now, Jeff Ryder, I think I should pronounce it,
yes.
Jeff was quoted in the Washington Post as saying Senator Norman did not remember the first call and ignored the second call. That was a quote from Jeff Ryder. Mm-hmm. And she made an attempt to get in touch with Tommy, but never made a connection, and she tried twice. Mm-hmm. And I remember her telling me she tried to call him.
Well, you got to return to phone calls, obviously. But the second thing is Senator Watkins, who was disturbed by this whole thing from day one, and I think that was that. Look, we had who we think is going to be your Senate colleague after November. We had Delegate Scott Surville on Monday at 6:15 a.m. And he told me he told our listeners right on the phone that Watkins was going to go with Roush. So they knew. I mean, obviously, if Scott Surville knew that, you would think that the Republican caucus knew that. And if he didn't go with Alston, then you knew that Lieutenant Governor Northam was going to break the tie. So it really seemed to me that you guys just outmaneuvered the Republicans, or they were mistaken about what exactly went down here, right?
Well, they may have thought they could turn, John Watkins, but I knew that wasn't going to happen. And what you're seeing is an unfortunate exodus of people who are interested in trying to make things work. And that vacuum is being filled, unfortunately, by some people who really aren't much interested in that. And, when you take a look at the retirements of John Watkins, of Walter Stosh, Jeff McWaters, and, these were guys who were trying to make things work. And I got a feeling that the frustration, based on what I know, the frustration is ultimately, driving a lot of these good people out. Toddy Puller, she's leaving for health reasons. But it's unfortunate that you're seeing this, and you take a look. I mean, this is what's happening. You had that Saxby retired, the U.S. Senator from Georgia, mm-hmm. Cole from Wisconsin. These were guys that were trying to make things work, and they weren't getting anywhere. Mm-hmm.
Well, look,
and I mean, sooner or later, this thing's got to get turned around. things used to work in this country, 30, 40, 50 years ago, but they're not working now. And, it's, this can't go on indefinitely, or we're going to have a nightmare on our hands.
We were very critical of the bravado that Governor McAuliffe took on in the first session when he was elected. And, we thought he didn't go through the normal channels. And so a lot of things backfired on him. But certainly in the 2015 session, we got a budget passed. It was pretty nondescript. I thought Governor McAuliffe learned from his 2014
right.
deal. And he's been on our show several times. He's certainly the most enthusiastic sales executive that Virginia's ever had, and he believes in what he's doing. And I just, I'm going to defend him on this, because if I'm the governor and I'm getting a letter from Dave Albo, who sits on who's the chairman of the Judiciary Committee in the House, that's got a super majority, I've got to assume that I've got clearance. I just have to make that assumption. Anybody would. So,
that's why I say I don't think this has, and like I said, Governor Kane, contrary to that story that was printed in the Virginia Pilot today, Kane did not consult with us that I can ever remember on any judicial appointments. And I know when that Supreme Court appointment was made by George Allen concerning Cynthia Kinzer, who turned out to be an excellent, Supreme Court justice, he didn't consult us. He made the appointment. She, by the way, she was not, I don't think she was a judge at all prior to that. She had an outstanding reputation, similar to what Jane Roush had. But he didn't call us, and quite frankly, I didn't expect to get a call.
Well, I tell you what, I've got the senator on my show on Friday. I'm live at the AFP conference in Columbus. I'm going to ask him that question point blank. Now, we're with Democratic Senate Minority Leader Dick Saslaw, the Godfather, live with us right now. And this just out from the chairman of the Republican Party of Virginia, John Whitbeck. He says, and I want to get you to respond to this, Senator.
Sure.
He says the Senate Democrats, with the explicit backing of Governor McAuliffe, attempted to adjourn session on the first day rather than do their work on a court-ordered redistricting plan. This is an embarrassment to Virginia. It is truly unfortunate that McAuliffe has borrowed shutdown tactics from D.C. and attempted to bring them to Richmond. He says, I applaud our Republican House and Senate leaders for staying committed to the legislative process and fulfilling their responsibilities as elected officials, finally saying that the governor needs to spend less time fundraising for Hillary Clinton and more time actually governing Virginia. So he's criticizing your shutdown tactics when you adjourned. How do you respond to that, and what was behind that?
Well, first off, let me just tell you this. This guy must have just arrived from Mars. Is he aware that the Republicans who run the show, never drew up any redistricting plan? That in itself was absurd. The second thing is, if he knew a damn thing about government, and he doesn't, he would know that the chair of the Privileges and Elections Committee, Senator Vogel, can hold. She's got two bills in there, both by Democrats. They can work on those bills. Committees are absolutely 100% free to meet when we're not in session and get work done. And if they report out a bill that is, agreeable to everybody, the governor can make a decision based on what he sees there. But quite frankly, they didn't draw up a bill. And they were going to come back and file one and give the governor, essentially, they said by September 1st, and give him about a couple hours to take a look at the bill with no public content, no public comment on the bill. I mean, I don't know what this guy Whitbeck is talking about, but he didn't know a thing about Virginia government.
So what do you think the Republicans' objective was in getting this out at the final hour here and staying in session? Obviously, you stay in session, you spend a lot of money, but what was their objective?
You know what? Their objective was they had two objectives. Number one, to make sure nothing happened that day, and 2, to get rid of Jane Roush. Those were their 2 objectives. They didn't have anything objective with respect to redistricting other than let nothing happen. They could have, listen, they could have drawn up a bill. They knew what the complaints were, about, what the federal judge had found wrong with that thing. They could have corrected that. I know that because I heard back chatter.
So they chose not to do that. So then what drove, Senator, your decision to adjourn? And obviously that there's no doubt that your decision to adjourn and getting Ralph Northam to break the tie on that definitely was a shocker to the Republican leadership. I don't think they expected that to happen.
It shouldn't have been. They should have been able to figure out that we were going to do that. And the reason was, why stay in session, okay? Why, put up the charade that you were actually working to get something done when you knew that we weren't. John, I talked to a boatload of Republicans. I talked to a boatload of Democrats. There was not a one of them who didn't think that ultimately this would have to be drawn by a 3-judge panel. I mean, every single one I talked to, not a person there thought that we could draw up a plan that everybody would agree to and get signed by the governor. And the governor, I think, made the right decision in shutting, and saying, look, what's the sense of going on? I may as well tell the judges that there is just realistically no way that we're going to reach an agreement, and let them start, let that panel start drawing up, a congressional redistricting. Now, I would prefer us to do it, okay? You've heard the expression, better the devil you know than the devil you don't.
Yes.
I'm a firm believer in that, okay? We should have done that. But they expressed no interest to me in getting that done. And the fact that they never drew a bill, House or Senate, tells me that. But let me tell you, I go back to the original premise. There is an intense hatred by the leadership of this governor, by the Republicans of this governor, and it's forcing them to make bad decisions.
That is going to be the fun.
And some of this is being driven by their base. Remember, this is the crowd, every last one of them. This is the crowd that in January of 2012, it put in a bill that forced women to undergo a transvaginal examination. That is a huge, huge thing when every OBGYN in this state said, what are you doing? And the only reason it came out was because even McDonald, as pro-life as he was, said he would not sign that bill. I don't know who's advising these people, but they need to get a new set of advisors.
Well, I'm not advising them. I can tell you that, obviously, and that's going to be the final word. And I've just got to say it. Maybe they should take their advice from Donald Trump. He's doing pretty well. We'll see how that works out.
He's certainly drawing a crowd, isn't he?
That's why we predicted he's going to be the 2016 Republican nominee. Hey, we're out of time. I want to thank the Godfather, Dick Saslaw, Minority Leader, Virginia Senate, for being with us, Democrat from Fairfax, District 35. And I also want to tell my audience the rumors of Dick Saslaw's demise are greatly exaggerated. The Godfather, back, large, and in charge.